Part 5. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 41. In the lobby of Nyata's Force store, there were 7 or 8 prototype cars of various types. A few scattered customers were looking at the cars in the store accompanied by salesmen. Su Ming and Wang Hao had just walked in, and a saleswoman with light makeup appeared. He took the initiative to greet him. "Hello sir, what type of car do you want to see?" Although she asked this question, without waiting for Su Ming and the others to answer, she took the initiative to introduce the nearest hatchback sedan. "It just so happened that you two came here. This Vios 1.3 manual version happened to be at an event, and it was exempt from purchase tax. The landing price is just over RMB 70,000, and the average fuel consumption is less than 6 liters per 100 kilometers, so it is very cost-effective in all aspects. As a salesperson, reading people is a very important skill. The female salesperson is considered to have rich experience. The first time she saw Su Ming and Wang Hao, she recommended a car based on her feelings that she thought was the best. The right car. Young people generally don't have strong purchasing power, and they don't know much about cars. They are mainly concerned about fuel consumption and appearance, and they want to be fuel efficient and fashionable. This Vios just meets these two conditions, and its sales volume has been very good. "We want to see off-road vehicles," Su Ming said. "Oh, please come this way." Although the female salesperson was a little surprised, the smile on her face remained unchanged. She turned around and led Su Ming and Wang Hao in another direction. RAV4 is also a long-established SUV. This is a new model for 2015. The price ranges from 180,000 to 270,000. In the same class of cars, it has plenty of space and a very fashionable appearance, said the salesperson. "This car is on the same level as my Escape. I have test-driven it. The space is indeed large enough and the power is average," Wang Hao said on the side. Su Ming thinks this RAV4 looks quite beautiful, and the front face looks domineering and a bit cute. Most of Toyota's models have good looks, with smooth lines and beautiful shapes. However, as Wang Hao said, the RAV4, like the Escape, is an urban off-road vehicle and a grocery shopping cart, so it is not a consideration. "Let's look at the others," Su Ming asked. The female salesperson smiled and did not take Su Ming and the others to see it immediately. Finally, she said with some substance, "Well, if it goes up, the price will be very expensive, and it is not on the same level as RAV4. Let's take a look and then talk," Su Ming said. "Then you can take a look at Prado and Cruiser." The saleswoman didn't introduce much this time. She just led Su Ming and the others to the prototype car and stood there smiling without saying anything. Su Ming read the introduction carefully and climbed into the car to experience it. The imported Cruiser is indeed a good car. It has full-time 4-wheel drive and is designed for off-road use. It has a 4.6L engine and more than 300 horsepower. The body weighs 2.5 tons. It looks like a hill when placed there, and the space inside is scary. What is rare is that the comfort is also very good. To be honest, Su Ming was a little tempted, but the problem was that the price was too expensive. The lowest configuration, naked bike, cost 800,000 yuan, and he still had to make a reservation and wait for the goods. "What about the Prado? What do you think?" "The price of this series is between 370,000 and 700,000 for a naked car. After accounting for purchase tax, insurance, etc., if it is on the road, it will be almost 10% more than the original price. Compared with the Cruiser, the Prado looks a little smaller, but it also has much more space than most off-road vehicles. In terms of performance, it directly catches up with the Cruiser. It can be said that the price/performance ratio is still good, and it is very comfortable to drive. Have a face." Seeing Su Ming look at the Cruiser seriously, the female salesperson's attitude changed subtly again. When she introduced the Prado, She was obviously much more detailed and enthusiastic than when she introduced the cruiser just now. The English name of Prado is Prado, and Chinese people are accustomed to call it domineering. As the name suggests, the car looks very domineering. It is the kind of ruthless car that Wang Hao mentioned before that was modified by a Middle Eastern tycoon with a machine gun. In the Chinese police force, very common in the military. What about the fuel consumption? Su Ming asked. I think you are indeed interested, so let me tell you the truth. If you drive in the city, the fuel consumption should be based on the data of the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, multiplied by 1.3. The fuel consumption on the highway is very low. If you have good driving habits, you will be fine. 11 kilometers per mile. How is it? Su Ming asked Wang Hao. Wang Hao gave a thumbs up and said, I don't think it's a good car. It has good off-road performance. The female saleswoman was very experienced. Looking at the expressions of the two people, she knew that the other party was interested in this car and had the financial ability. She struck while the iron was hot and said, if you can make a reservation today, you will pay a handling fee of 50,000 yuan to pick up the car. You can sign the car contract. Su Ming was stunned and looked at Wang Hao. Isn't it usually a deposit? What is the handling fee for picking up the car? Hey, some cars are selling so well that not only are they not discounted, but they also have to add a car pickup fee to pick up the car. It's okay if you don't add any money. Then you just wait. You may not be able to wait for a few months. Volkswagen Tiguan, it's the same. For a car worth more than 200,000 yuan, there will be an extra 10,000 to 20,000 yuan for pickup fee. Wang Hao looked like he was well educated. Su Ming frowned slightly, feeling a little unhappy. What's this? Consumption kidnapping? Seeing Su Ming's hesitation, the saleswoman persuaded him, I think since you are interested in this car and have a connection with this car, you have already spent 400,000 to 500,000 yuan, so you don't need to care about the tens of thousands of yuan. What do you think? Do I have to pay more? Su Ming asked. The saleswoman nodded apologetically, and then said, how about I go ask the manager for instructions and see if I can pay less, but there must be a fare, and this is also an industry rule. When Su Ming heard what she said, he waved his hand, forget it, let's take a look again. There are more than one good car. Although my money is like the wind, I don't want to be ripped off. I hate being coerced since I was a child. If I want to pay more for the car, what's the difference between this and coercion? Hey, wait a minute, I'll ask the manager to try to reduce the car fee. The female salesperson saw that a big deal was about to run away, and hurriedly chased after him in high heels. When she chased out of the door, she saw Su Ming and Wang Hao had already entered another Ford store. Oh, the deal is gone, the female salesperson sighed, a little depressed. Su Ming and Wang Hao visited several more Ford stores. I looked at the Highlander at GAC Toyota. It is a good car for family use, but its off-road performance is so-so, and you have to pay for the car. The Buick Encore is powerful, but Su Ming doesn't like the shape. Several cheap Land Rovers seem to be more pretentious than practical. As for Mercedes-Benz and BMW, they are indeed first-class cars, and you can buy them for 400,000 or 500,000 yuan, but Su Ming feels that he is not yet at the stage of driving these brands. Wang Hao followed behind and his legs became thinner. He said, hey, having money is also a kind of trouble. I don't know how to spend it. That's because I'm not rich enough. If I had a few 100 million, I could buy whatever I like. That would be simple, Su Ming joked. I don't expect a few 100 million. If I can make 10 million in this life, I will not live in vain, Wang Hao said. Earning 10 million in a fair and honest way is not an easy thing for anyone, but Su Ming really doesn't take 10 million too seriously. If he had the ability of animal friends, he would not be able to earn 10 million in his life. It would be better to die directly. As they talked, the two came to the east of the famous car square, to the door of a small Ford store. The store was deserted, without a single customer. There was only a young male salesperson in the store, sitting on the side with his legs crossed and smoking a cigarette, looking careless. When he saw a customer coming, the male salesperson didn't mean to get up to greet him, but greeted him from a distance, "Just look around." Su-ming came to buy a car, not to make friends with the salesperson, so it didn't matter whether the salesperson was enthusiastic or not, so he went straight to the booth. When he saw the Jeep Wrangler on the booth, his eyes lit up. "Oh my God, how could I forget that when it comes to off-road performance, of course it's the Jeep." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 42. Jeep can be said to be the first off-road vehicle that Chinese people came into contact with, so that for a period of time, Jeep was synonymous with off-road vehicles. This four-wheel drive vehicle made by Chrysler Jeep in the United States is very famous in the civilian field due to its stable performance, powerful power, adaptability, and the key is that it is particularly tough and durable. It is not only quite famous in the civilian field, but also widely used in the military field. In World War II, Jeep almost became the exclusive vehicle for generals. Su-ming's generation has watched many movies about World War II, the War of Resistance against Japan and the War of Liberation since childhood. In the movies, no matter which side the officers are from, as long as they appear on the battlefield, they must ride in a Jeep. Next to the marching team covered with yellow sand, a military green Jeep sped over, with two soldiers carrying carbines sitting in the back, and the general in the co-pilot wearing sunglasses and holding a cigar diagonally, which is simply the most classic picture. The Jeep Wrangler in front of him is square and hard-lined, full of tough guy atmosphere. The original model of the Wrangler is the Jeep that the Americans often rode in World War II. After decades of continuous replacement and upgrading, it has a larger space, greatly improved maneuverability and adaptability, and its off-road performance has only increased. The ladder beam structure, non-independent suspension of the front and rear rigid axles, and the front, middle and rear differential locks are the only choice for hardcore off-road vehicles. Coupled with the sturdy and reliable engine, it can make people full of confidence no matter how bad the surrounding environment is. "How could I forget it?" Wang Hao also slapped his forehead and said, "Speaking of off-road, the cars I just saw are toys in front of this guy." The Grand Cherokee is not bad either. The male salesman finally finished his cigarette, staggered over, and interrupted to introduce it. Not far from the Wrangler is a Grand Cherokee. Compared with the Wrangler, the Grand Cherokee is larger in size and has a relatively stronger business temperament. If the Wrangler is a lonely knight, walking the world with a sword, then the Grand Cherokee is the head of a big section. Although both are strong enough, the Wrangler is more individualistic, while the Cherokee is calm and introverted. In a Hong Kong movie called Blind Detective, the female police officer played by Sammy Cheng drove a Grand Cherokee, which was very domineering. If the requirements for comfort and business are higher than off-road performance, I personally recommend the Grand Cherokee, which has much better interior and configuration than the Wrangler. Off-road performance is just the opposite. Hey, you can drive it directly to climb mountains. Moreover, the Wrangler is a fully mechanical type, while the Grand Cherokee is equipped with many electronic devices. In the words of people who like off-road, machinery is a guarantee of safety. The male salesperson continued to introduce. "Is electronics safer than machinery?" Su-ming asked Wang Hao. Wang Hao nodded. "Of course, electronic equipment relies on circuits, and water ingress is easy to cause failures, but machinery is different, unless it is rusted. For example, if a car falls into a river, the electronically controlled doors and windows will be useless, and passengers can easily be suffocated inside, but mechanical control will not. So that's the case. This is the first time Su-ming has come into contact with relevant information. He used to think that those who fell into the water and suffocated were stupid. Why didn't they open the doors and windows to escape? How about a test drive? The male salesperson didn't ask Su Ming if he could afford it, but asked directly. Try it. Su Ming followed the salesperson out of the hall without saying a word and jumped into a test drive car. He took the manual transmission test that year. Although he hadn't touched a car for a while, he still knew how to drive. The Wrangler in front of him was an automatic transmission, which was easier to drive, just like driving a bumper boat or a bumper car. Su Ming put his right foot on the accelerator and slowly stepped on the gas. When he started, he immediately felt a strong push on his back. Only those who are looking for death will step on the accelerator in the city, and the 3.6L tough off-road power should not be underestimated. Most of the time, there is no need to step on the accelerator to the bottom. This kind of car that is purely for off-road is indeed rare in the city. The Wrangler drove on the test drive route around the Ford store. Along the way, it attracted a lot of attention. Car owners passing by on both sides kept rolling down the window to look at the Wrangler. Buzz, a strong motor sound came, and an Audi A6 passed by the Wrangler very arrogantly. Lao Su, catch up with it, Wang Hao was angry. Su Ming laughed. The most taboo when driving is anger, especially for novices. Besides, different cars have different uses, and the Wrangler is not for racing. Stupid. A jerk, don't bother with him. The male salesman raised his middle finger from the Wrangler's convertible, whistled, and said, if he were in the wild, he wouldn't even be able to get a bite of our car's fart. Su Ming looked at the male salesman with a little surprise. He had been shopping for a day, and the salesmen he met were all well trained and polite. It was rare to see someone as careless as him. The male salesman smiled and said, I'm just a temporary worker, just messing around. Su Ming. Wang Hao. After driving around, Su Ming took a test drive of the Grand Cherokee again. The comfort of the Grand Cherokee was indeed far superior to that of the Wrangler. The suspension of the Wrangler was very stiff, and it was very bumpy to sit on it. How about it, are you sure? Wang Hao pulled Su Ming aside to discuss. Just the Wrangler, Su Ming said without hesitation. This is just like choosing a partner. As long as you like each other conditions are not important. In the end, I chose a Wrangler 3.6L four-door version. There was no discount and no additional handling fee for picking up the car, which was considered average. With purchase tax, insurance, and licensing, the landing price was just shy of 600,000 yuan. The male salesman conjured a CD and inserted it into the Wrangler's console. This CD is a gift from me personally. It just matches this car. The other configurations of the Wrangler are average, but the audio in the car is quite good. When the male salesman presses the play button, a somewhat old-fashioned music song plays. Old soldiers never die, they just fade away. Veterans never die, they just wither away. This song is called Veterans Never Die, and it was widely circulated among the Allied forces during World War II. At that time, the song that accompanied the Allied soldiers across the battlefield was the ancestor of this Wrangler. A war reporter at the time said this about the Jeep, without it, I don't think the war can be won. It can do anything, including carrying twice the cargo of the design standard, and go anywhere, such as running tens of thousands of kilometers in the African desert. It is as loyal as a dog and as strong as a mule. As nimble as a goat. The male salesman's eyes were deep. To be honest, I envy you for owning such a car that only a real man can drive. Before Su Ming could say anything, Wang Hao pulled Su Ming's sleeve and whispered into his ear. Hurry up and leave. This guy is suffering from Chuyunibu. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 43. The male salesman may or may not have a secondary problem, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that Su Ming really liked this Wrangler. He paid the money on the same day, went to the vehicle management office to choose the license plate number, and received a temporary license plate. "I'll go, what about the two cars?" Wang Hao looked at his little Escape, and then at Su Ming's Wrangler. With the two cars side by side, the Escape was originally able to support its appearance to some extent, but compared with the distinctive Wrangler next to it, it was completely reduced to a passerby. Each drives his own car, each goes back to his own home, each looks for his own mother, Su Ming said matter-of-factly. "That's not possible. I have to ravage your car today, otherwise I will be unbalanced and unable to sleep tonight. I will leave this here for now, and I will pick it up tomorrow." Wang Hao couldn't help but jump into the driver's seat of the Wrangler. Su Ming smiled and didn't say anything, and got into the passenger seat. The seat belt had just been buckled, and the feeling of pushing against the seat was overwhelming, and the Wrangler rushed out like a wild horse. Not long after, Su Ming began to regret letting Fatty Wang drive. Whenever he met a pretty girl, this guy would deliberately slow down, pass by her, and then blow a kiss coquettishly. "I think it's time for you to seriously find a girlfriend," Su Ming said. Wang Hao said seriously, "I think I should buy a good car seriously." Wang Hao drove back to his home first, and then Su Ming changed into the driver's seat and drove slowly back to the zoo. Driving back in a jeep, it caused another moderate sensation in the zoo. This kind of car is not common. Younger employees think that if Su Ming is so rich, why not buy a Mercedes-Benz and BMW? Some older people kept gesticulating with their thumbs. After returning to the park, he drove to Shuahun Lake for a walk. The shore of Shuahun Lake is shaded by willow trees, and there are cobblestone roads and benches every few dozen meters. The environment is very nice. However, after walking around, I didn't find many tourists. The artificial lake in Nyida seemed deserted. Tingfeng Pavilion stands right by the lake. The architectural style is biased toward the Han and Tang dynasties. It has 6 floors and is about 30 meters high. The bottom floor is hundreds of square meters in size and sells some souvenirs. For safety reasons, tourists are not allowed to enter the top floor. There are some wood carvings on the remaining 4 floors for people to buy tickets to visit. When Su Ming came, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but there was not a single tourist in Tingfeng Pavilion. Lao Zhou, who was in charge of selling souvenirs, was dozing on the counter. He raised his head when he heard the sound of cars outside the door. "Hey, Xiao Su. Darling, this car is really high-end. Only big leaders and generals could ride in it before. Did you buy it?" Lao Zhou came out with a smile. "I'm just a little guard at best," haha. Su Ming chuckled, then handed over a cigarette and asked, "Master Zhou, there are usually no people here." Master Zhou looked at the China logo on the cigarette. He didn't smoke it, but clamped it on his ear. He smiled bitterly and said, "No one is here. These souvenirs are all fake. They are very expensive. Those pieces of broken wood are on top. They charge 15 yuan for admission. You really think everyone is a fool? Well, people used to row boats in Shuahun Lake. Later, a boss contracted to raise fish, and the boating business stopped. As a result, no fish were raised. Yes, it's because the water quality is too poor." After chatting with Master Zhou, Su Ming roughly knew the situation of Shuahun Lake. Then Su Ming handed half a bag of Chinese to Master Lin and walked to the edge of Shuahun Lake for an on-site inspection. As the saying goes, when raising fish, you must first raise water. Good water raises good fish. In fact, it is not only raising fish, but also water quality is very important to most aquatic organisms. If the water quality is good, fish and shrimp will grow fast and have good meat quality. On the contrary, it is very difficult to survive. The higher the value of aquatic products, the higher the requirements for water quality, especially for freshwater fish. Since Su Ming contracted Shuahun Lake, Of course he also wanted to try out whether he could engage in breeding. After walking around the lake for a while, I found that most of the lake water was light green with poor transparency. In some corners, the lake water was even reddish and had a faint smell. Shuahun Lake is an artificial lake with blocked water flow. Over the past few decades, without effective management measures, it has gradually turned into a pool of stagnant water. With this kind of water quality, you can also raise crayfish, loaches, and catfish. These things are not hygienic and love to eat garbage and carrion. Some time ago, the newspaper reported there is a very famous grilled fish restaurant. The fat-headed fish used for grilling are grown up with leftovers from the restaurant. The feeding scene is disgusting, and the entire fish pond also exudes a smell. Taste. This report caused quite a stir, and even the grilled fish restaurant was forced to close down. In fact, fathead fish eat these things to grow well and quickly. However, Su Ming is not planning to raise fatheads or catfish on a large scale. Let's not talk about the economic benefits. If he turns a good artificial lake into a smelly garbage dump, Director Song will be the first to find it. He's in trouble. Although catfish are not raised, catfish can still come in handy. I drove to pick up the big-headed catfish and snapping turtle, and asked these two guys to search the artificial lake carefully. The two coolies wandered around the artificial lake all night and found nothing special. There are a lot of fish in the lake, and the few here and there are also ornamental fish. On the contrary, there are a lot of loaches, eels, small crabs, crayfish, and the like, which make the snapping turtles and big-headed catfish full. Day 2, you can stay here, snapping turtle, you can go back to Shuaxi and continue to be a bodyguard. The big-headed catfish was so excited that it dived into the water and swung its tail happily. The alligator snapper half opened its mouth and stared at Su Ming with its two small eyes, almost writing the word depressed on its back shell. They both don't care about the water quality. The Shuahun Lake is much larger than the Shuaxi Lake. There are delicious foods everywhere in the lake, which is certainly more enjoyable than the small lake in Shuaxi. Oh my God, if you have the final say, why do you need me as the boss? Su Ming was too lazy to pay attention to it. After returning, Su Ming took out the honeycomb he brewed 2 days ago. It was almost fermented and mixed with vinegar, sour and sweet. Hey, Nangong reporter, what are you doing? He sent a text message to Nangong Yan. Not long after, Nangong Yan called back immediately, do you have anything to do tomorrow? Let's go out and play together. Hey, your TV station is so busy, and tomorrow is not a festival, where do you find the time? Didn't I tell you last time that I have a lot of acne recently? It has become more and more serious in the past few days, and I can't cover it with makeup. The director told me to take a break for a while and not to appear on camera for the time being, Nangong Yan said depressedly. That's perfect. Tomorrow I plan to go to Huading Reservoir to investigate breeding. You can come and play with me, Su Ming said. What to raise? Do you know how to raise it? Nangong Yan asked curiously. It's because I don't know what to raise and I can't raise it, so I have to go to the reservoir to investigate. By the way, I'll prepare some barbecue. After the investigation, let's go to the reservoir to have barbecue, Su Ming said. That's fine. Just the two of us, Nangong Yan said. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 44. Huading Reservoir is more than 10 kilometers away from Yangchuan City, right next to the city zoo. It takes less than 20 minutes to walk to the zoo. The surrounding mountains and rivers are beautiful. Citizens often come to the reservoir with their families when they are free on weekends. After Su Ming contracted Shuahun Lake, he did plan to raise fish. Such a large lake certainly cannot be left vacant. In addition to aquatic products, there are no other projects to do. Every profession has its own specialty. When it comes to fish farming, Su Ming is a layman. He doesn't know anything about fry, feed, feeding, disease prevention, and sales. Except for biological research, Su Ming is a layman in other things. Many college students face the same dilemma as Su Ming after graduation. The majors they studied are not related to actual work. But as the saying goes, it's not afraid of not understanding, but it's afraid of not being attentive. The road needs people to walk out. God will not arrange everything for you to take for nothing. Life is a process of continuous learning and progress. A part of the east side of Huading Reservoir was contracted by a fishery company, which is specially used for fish farming. It is said that the benefits are very good, with an annual income of tens of millions. Su Ming was thinking about asking for advice from the fish farming business in the reservoir is very big, almost covering half of the freshwater fish business in Yangchuan City. It is completely different from the small Shuahun Lake, and there is no fundamental conflict between the two sides. He ran to buy 2 Zonghua cigarettes and 2 bottles of Wulianjai early in the morning, and prepared some barbecue stuff in the car, and drove towards Nangong's house. At the entrance of Guanghua community, Nangong Yan was wearing a loose sportswear and a short ponytail, looking neat and tidy. But she was yelling at the phone at this time. Do you still have a sense of time? You can be late for an hour even if you drive. I surrender to you. Su Ming was also wronged. He had never driven before and was not familiar with the road conditions. How could he know that there was a traffic jam in the city early in the morning? Come quickly, I'm going to be pissed off by you. Okay, I've seen you, turn around and come over. Nangong Yan had just hung up the phone when a new BMW 320 came speeding from the side of the road, swung its body slightly, and stopped in front of her. Nangong Yan was stunned. Didn't they say it was a Jeep off-road vehicle? The BMW window slowly rolled down, revealing a handsome face. Nangong Yan could see clearly that the person in the car was not Su Ming, but Huang Fei, the host of another program on the TV station. Huang Fei joined the TV station a few years earlier than Nangong Yan. With his good family background and outstanding appearance, he was very successful in the TV program and was considered a well-known host in Yangchuan City. Huang Fei is Nangong Yan Sr. Nangong Yan was startled by the sudden appearance of the BMW, but she still smiled politely and said, "Hello, Huang, what's up?" Huang Fei shrugged, put his arm on the car window, and shook his hair in a self-conscious manner. "I happen to be free today, let's have lunch together at noon." When you go out to work, you always have to attend necessary social events. The key is to grasp the degree. Nangong Yan's family background is not bad. Although she is not afraid of Huang Fei, there is no need to offend him for no reason. But she has already made an appointment with Su Ming today. Nangong Yan can only smile apologetically and say, "I'm really sorry, I have an appointment with a friend." "Oh, is that so?" Huang Fei still had a smile on his face, and then he said as if he was talking about an irrelevant topic, "There are several new people in your column recently. You can't be on camera during this period. Do you want me to tell your director to prevent those new people from taking your place?" When Nangong Yan heard him say this, the smile on her face disappeared immediately, and her face suddenly became gloomy. She said with a stern face, "Huang Fei, whether I can be on camera has nothing to do with you, and you can't decide my future. If there is nothing else, you can leave." After saying that, she stopped looking at Huang Fei and looked away. Huang Fei was a little embarrassed, and his face changed slightly. He laughed dryly and was about to say something to ease the atmosphere. Suddenly, an off-road vehicle with an unbelievably sturdy shape came directly from a distance, rushed past the BMW closely, and stopped accurately in front of the BMW. The petite 320 behind the Wrangler was like a shy little girl standing next to a sturdy man, without any momentum at all. Even in terms of pedigree, brilliance, BMW is completely suppressed by the imported Jeep. Huang Fei was so scared that he almost peed, his face was pale. Just now, the Wrangler passed by the BMW closely. If there was a slight mistake, the off-road Wrangler would definitely run over the BMW directly. After staring at the off-road vehicle in front for a long time, he yelled at the front, how do you drive?" The door of the Wrangler opened, Su Ming leaned out of the driver's seat, looked at Huang Fei behind him, and asked, "What's wrong?" Huang Fei was scared and hesitated for a while. Su Ming shook his head strangely and muttered, "I'm sick." Then he snapped his fingers at Nangongyan, who was stunned on the side. "Get in the car." "Oh, oh." Nangongyan woke up as if from a dream and got on the back seat of the Wrangler. Su Ming stepped on the accelerator, and the Wrangler blew out a stream of exhaust gas and roared out, leaving Huang Fei stupidly stunned in the car. After Nangongyan got in the car, she looked at Su Ming, who was concentrating on driving, and suddenly smiled and said, "You are quite angry today. You are driving an off-road vehicle and you are actually acting tough. How did I offend you?" Su Ming turned aside, casually pulled out the passenger seat belt and put it on Nangongyan, then sat up straight and said, "I just want to teach him not to park indiscriminately, otherwise he might be run over by an off-road vehicle." "Oh? I thought you were jealous." Nangongyan curled her fingers around her hair. "Are you jealous if you don't have any dumplings?" Su Ming also smiled, seriously, "That guy doesn't really have any evil intentions towards you, does he?" Nangongyan snorted, pursed her pink lips, and muttered, "Tch, isn't this weird? I am so beautiful. Apart from you, it seems that many men have evil intentions towards me. If it delays your good work, how about I send you back?" Su Ming asked, pretending to be tentative. Nangongyan suddenly came up to her, narrowed her eyes, and stared at Su Ming carefully for a long time, then suddenly said, "I've always been curious, are you gay?" "I actually know a gay man." Su Ming suddenly thought of Rob Ben from the auction house. "Tch, I suspect you are gay." Nangongyan leaned back on her seat again. "As for that guy, I don't like him, he's just a playboy." Su Ming didn't have to worry about Nangongyan. Her father was the leader of the criminal police team of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. It was okay for a man to pursue Nangongyan normally, but if anyone dared to use their brains, her father would have to eat him alive. He took out a large plastic bucket from behind the chair, shook it, changed the subject and said, "This is for you. Remember to take it home when you get back." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 45. Nangongyan looked back at the plastic bucket and asked, "What's in it?" "It's wild honeycomb and vinegar. Didn't you say last time that you couldn't be on camera with acne on your face? Drink a small cup every morning and evening, and I guarantee that your acne will be gone within a week." She opened her eyes wide. "Is it true? I've tried several kinds of medicine but none of them worked. How can this honeycomb be so powerful that it works in a week?" Su Ming said confidently, "It's normal for you to have acne at the age of 21 or 22. During adolescence, taking medicine can easily cause body dysfunction. Don't take medicine in the future, just drink this. It's all natural. I guarantee that you will have a pretty face that everyone loves and flowers bloom in a week. Wild honeycomb soaked in vinegar can clear away heat and expel fire. This method was taught to my mother by my father. In the past, young women in my hometown would ask my mother for help when they had acne on their faces. There would be obvious results in 2 or 3 days." Nangongyan squeezed a small pimple on her chin while looking at the rearview mirror, saying, "Okay, I'll listen to you and won't take medicine for now. But I'm going to be on camera next week. If the pimple doesn't go away by then, you're dead. Sister, we've known each other for several years and you scare me like this every time. I've died hundreds of times. Can you change your lines next time?" Su Ming said with a smile. "I'm happy to do it, what do you care?" After the car drove out of the city, the road gradually narrowed. Su Ming simply turned the steering wheel and drove the car out of the main road and plunged into the wilderness. The off-road performance of the Wrangler is not exaggerated. It can easily roll over a small hill with a slope of less than 30 degrees. It can easily pass through a half-meter deep stream with pebbles and water splashing, which makes the car owners on the road in the distance envious. In the end, they just drove along the road beside the reservoir. Nangongyan's face turned pale due to the bumps along the way, and she held the frame tightly. In terms of comfort alone, off-road vehicles are definitely not as good as cars of the same level, especially for typical hardcore off-road vehicles like the Wrangler, which are even less comfortable. But then again, if you change to a car, even if it is a car worth millions, you can't drive directly over the mountains and ridges to the reservoir. You can only park on the roadside a few kilometers away and walk over. Fortunately, after arriving at the reservoir, the road is much easier to walk, and it is basically all water and grass. Nangongyan's attention was quickly attracted. In the distance, the endless reservoir lake was sparkling. From time to time, water birds flapped their wings and flew out from the reeds, gliding on the water for a while, and then landed on the shallow water not far away, lowering their heads to comb their feathers, or looking for food in the water grass under their feet. It's so beautiful, Nangongyan leaned back in the chair, looking at the scenery in front of her in a trance. Su Ming thought very inappropriately, and didn't know how those water birds would taste if they were used for barbecue. Although he has friends of animals, he is not a vegetarian. The food chain is the basic law of nature. He just doesn't eat animals he knows. Not long after, a narrow cement road appeared in front of him. He drove along the cement road for about a few hundred meters and came to a 3-story villa. The villa is a small building built by rural people on their own homesteads. It is surrounded by a red wall more than 3 meters high. In front of the 2 large iron gates, 2 stone lions squatted on the left and right. There was a sign on the door, Huading Fishery Company. Before Su Ming got out of the car, a dog barked in the yard behind the iron gate. "Is anyone home?" Su Ming knocked on the big iron gate. The iron gate opened a crack, and a bald man with a naked upper body and an in tattoo on his arm, led 2 wolfhounds, and asked impatiently, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm from Yangchuan Zoo. Our zoo is preparing to raise fish. I want to ask your boss for advice." Su Ming explained his purpose to the young man. The bald man frowned and was about to close the door directly. Later, Su Ming took out his work permit for the zoo, and he endured his impatience and listened to Su Ming's words. "Wait, I'll go ask the boss." The bald man slammed the big iron door shut, turned around and went upstairs, and came back in a few minutes. "Boss Joe, that's them," he came back with a thin man with dark skin, "the boss of the fishery company, Boss Joe." Boss Joe looked at Su Ming expressionlessly, then looked at the gift in his hand, and said coldly, "I have no dealings with your zoo. If you want to raise fish, it's your business and has nothing to do with me. But I warn you, if I find out that you are planning to take my reservoir, you will suffer." After that, he turned around and left. "Let's go," the bald man waved his hand like he was shooing away flies and slammed the door shut. Judging from Boss Joe's attitude, it is impossible for him to teach his experience in raising fish. But Su Ming was not in a hurry. Without Zhang the butcher, would he still eat pigs with hair? There are many people who can raise fish, and he is not the only one. With the help of animal friends, Su Ming does not believe that he cannot raise good fish. After several contacts with spiritual power, the big-headed catfish became able to eat and swim. In just 1 month, its size has obviously grown a circle. What's your attitude? It's just hiring a few released prisoners to watch the fish pond. Why pretend to be a gangster? Nangongyan's father is a criminal policeman, and she is least afraid of such people. Forget it, if we don't want to do it, let's go barbecue. Su Ming restarted the Wrangler, found a piece of grass near the water by the reservoir, spread a layer of plastic paper on the ground, and took the barbecue rack off the car. The grill was bought online, a retractable iron rack, a set of iron forks, plates, and other tools, and 2 kilograms of charcoal, a total of 220 yuan. The charcoal was stacked like a pyramid, and then ignited with solid alcohol. Su Ming put the iron skewer with meat on the grill and flipped it back and forth quickly. Not long after, the skewers made a sizzling sound, and occasionally a few drops of oil dripped on the charcoal below, and the red meat soon turned into a uniform light gold color. Very skilled. You can also grill, Nangongyan asked curiously when she saw Su Ming's skillful craftsmanship. What's this? You'll know later. Su Ming stared at the color change of the barbecue, picked up a seasoning bottle on the grill, and sprinkled the seasoning evenly on the skewers. Nangongyan sniffed and her eyes lit up. What a nice smell. What seasoning did you use? Su Ming shook the small tin bottle of seasoning and said, my father gave me cumin and pepper salt, and some Chinese medicinal herbs for flavor. When my father was alive, he mainly worked in the wild, and he cooked in the wild for half a year. Over time, he actually developed good cooking skills, especially barbecue and other outdoor cooking skills, which are simply first class. Soon the first batch of skewers were cooked, and Su Ming handed a handful to Nangongyan. Let's go. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 46. Nangongyan took the meat skewer and just opened her mouth. When Su Ming said to start jerking off, the meat skewer stopped at her mouth and glared at Su Ming. I just know how to jerk you off. While Su Ming continued to put the raw meat on the fire to roast, he said with a smile without raising his head, what are you doing? Nangongyan was stunned for a moment, and it took her a long time to react, and her face suddenly turned red. I'm too lazy to pay attention to you, I'll eat the meat first. If it doesn't taste good, you'll be dead. She took the meat skewer, took a small bite delicately, and chewed it a few times. How is it? Su Ming asked. Wow, it smells really good. It's really different from the food stalls. Big beast, you are indeed a good wife and mother, you can go to the hall and go to the kitchen. While talking, Nangongyan pouted and blew on the steaming meat skewers. She also fanned the sides with her hands. Before the meat skewers cooled down, she pulled the remaining half of the skewers into her mouth. Suddenly it was filled to the brim. The barbecue is getting hot and you have pimples all over your face. Eat less. Ignore it, don't you have your honey vinegar? Anyway, if the acne can't be eliminated, you will be dead. Su Ming. Nangongyan kept talking, and her eating speed was not slow at all. Before the second handful of meat skewers was cooked, the first dozen or so skewers in her hand had disappeared. Su Ming was grilling meat at the same speed. Don't eat with her. Slow down, sister, I haven't taken a bite yet. Su Ming looked up and his eyes fell on an old man who was fishing in the distance. He turned to Nangongyan and said, I'm going to ask the old man if he caught any fish. I'll buy 2 and bake them back. There are often fishermen by the reservoir, but because the reservoir is so big, if you are unlucky, you may not be able to catch a fish in the whole day, but if you are lucky, you can catch big fish weighing more than 10 kilograms or even dozens of kilograms. The meat skewers were so infrequently eaten that they were grilled for a long time and were not enough for Nangongyan to eat. In comparison, the fish was much better. A fish of 1 or 2 kilograms could probably feed Nangongyan. You go, I'll grill it. Nangongyan waved her hand and stood in front of the barbecue grill. Su Ming wiped his hands on his apron and walked towards the old fishing man. Not far away, several dogs barked in the distance, and several young men holding sticks ran towards the old fishing man from a distance along the lake. The leader, holding 2 big wolf dogs in his hands, was the tattooed bald head that Su Ming saw just now at the fishing company. "Who asked you to fish here?" Bald head yelled from a distance. The old man was shocked, quickly pulled the fishing line back, and ran away carrying the small bench. As soon as the bald man let go, the two wolf dogs rushed out, chasing the old man several times, stopping him one after another, and growling at the old man with bared teeth. The old man was afraid that the wolf dog would bite him, so he squatted on the ground and did not dare to run again. At this time, the bald man caught up from behind, grabbed the old man's fishing rod, hit it hard on his knee, cut the fishing rod in two, threw it aside, and asked viciously, "The reservoir is contracted by my boss. Which one allows you to fish in the reservoir?" The old man looked at the broken fishing rod in two parts with great distress, but did not dare to say anything. He just begged for mercy and said, "Brothers, I'm really sorry. I really didn't know that the reservoir was contracted, and I didn't catch any fish. I also poked out my fishing rod for you. Why not if I don't come back in the future?" A naughty young man kicked the old man and said, "Fart, you said you didn't catch it, you didn't catch it." The old man kicked the ground and didn't dare to resist. He held up the empty fish basket and said, "Brothers, look, I really didn't catch any fish. I don't care if you catch it or not. Pay the fine, 500 yuan, the bald man said impatiently. "Brother, I only have a few dollars for fares with me. I really don't have any." The bald man raised the steel pipe and waved it hard in front of the old man, and said viciously, "What nonsense, I either pay you or break your leg. It's your choice." He was holding up the steel pipe to scare the old man when he noticed a young man looking in this direction not far away. He turned his head, raised the steel pipe in his hand and pointed his finger at Su Ming at the top of his lungs. "What are you looking at? It's none of your business, get out." Su Ming is not a nosy person. Normally, he would not interfere. These ruffians are hired by the fishing company to look after the fish ponds. They want to prevent people from stealing fish and fishing. It is reasonable to drive away the old fishermen. Although the method is a bit excessive, if they are not more vicious, others will not be afraid. In the reservoir all the fish have been stolen long ago. But Su Ming would definitely be unhappy if this bald man cursed people in front of him one after another, and he would get angry at anyone he insulted. As he got closer, the bald man recognized Su Ming and stared. "Hey, it's you. What, are you going to take care of it?" Su Ming ignored him, squinted at the water area where the old man was fishing, and then said, "I remember you contracted the water area east of the reservoir. People fishing here seem to have nothing to do with you." The bald man looked violent and asked in a sinister tone, "Let me ask you, do you want to take care of this?" As soon as he said this, several gangsters surrounded him and looked at Su Ming with unkind expressions. Driven by their master, the two wolf dogs also changed their targets. Their blood-red eyes were fixed on Su Ming. Two rows of fangs protruded from the corners of their mouths. They let out low growls and looked like they were about to pounce. Su Ming glanced at the two wolfhounds and released his mental power without making a sound. The two wolfhounds immediately became much more docile when they came into contact with the mental power. They squatted down on the spot, their eyes became gentle, and they grew long tongues. They panted at Su Ming and shook their tails. The bald man looked at the two wolfhounds in surprise. It was a bit puzzling. These two dogs were usually fed with live chickens and ducks. They were fierce and had bitten people who came to fish and steal fish more than once. Why did they become so honest today? Su Ming bent down to pick up the broken fishing rod on the ground and continued, "You are the ones who look after the fish pond. You can drive people away, but why do you break their fishing rods? Also, you want to fine people, do you have an invoice? I can see that you are here to make trouble today. You want an invoice, right? I'll give you an invoice." The bald man raised the steel pipe and smashed it at Su Ming's shoulder, and shouted at the same time, hit me. Just as the ruffians were about to take action, a scene that stunned them happened. That nosy boy, seeing that they were about to attack, turned around and ran without hesitation. Want to run? Hey and hey, come on. After hearing the master's order, the two wolfhounds sat there stupidly, shaking their heads and looking at the bald man, then at Su Ming who was running away, sticking out their tongues and exhaling, but they refused to get up and chase. The wolfhounds were raised by the fishery company. Although they were shocked by the mental power and would not attack Su Ming's current strength was not enough to make the two dogs turn to attack their master, so the two wolfhounds were now quite confused and didn't know who to help. Damn, I saw a ghost. The bald man cursed and took a few men to chase Su Ming in person. The road by the river was not easy to walk on. These ruffians often fought and had good physical fitness. It would not take long for them to catch up with Su Ming. In the distance, Nangongyi had already taken out his mobile phone to call the police. Before the call was made, a buzzing sound suddenly sounded not far away, and a black cloud floated out of the woods and flew towards Su Ming and the bald man. What is that, damn? Wasps. Be careful. The bald man was shocked. No matter how ruthless he was, he dared not confront the wasps head-on, so he quickly stopped. Su Ming saw the wasps coming, so he simply stopped running. He turned around and gave the bald man a weird smile, slowly lying on the ground, holding his head with both hands, motionless, as if afraid of attracting the attention of the wasps. After lying down, Su Ming still looked very kind, raised his head and blinked at the bald man, and gestured a thumbs up with admiration, and said loudly, "The wasps are coming, you don't hide. You have guts." The bald man was stunned, thinking that he had seen many idiots, but he had never seen such a thing. Do you think that if you lie down and hold your head, the wasps can't see you? Before he finished speaking, as if to prove the simplest truth that if you don't avoid wasps, you will be stung by them, the swarm of wasps that was originally between the two groups of people suddenly swarmed towards the bald man. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 47. After the hornets appeared, the situation suddenly reversed. The bald man who was chasing Su Ming with steel pipes didn't care about Su Ming and the fines. He was chased by the hornets and ran away. Two wolfhounds squatted on the side, looking at the bald man and his friends screaming and running past them with a blank look, followed by a large group of black things. The hornets soon caught up with the bald man and his friends. The screams of ghosts and wolves kept coming from the river bank in the distance. The bald man who was originally in the front was the first to be hit. He was stung several times on his bald head, and a big bulge appeared. From a distance, he looked like the Buddha descended to the earth. Under Su Ming's intentional control, the hornets stung the opponent's non-fatal parts. Although the toxins released were not enough to kill them, they were enough to give them a profound and unforgettable lesson. In the blink of an eye, several ruffians threw away their armor and ran away without a trace. The two wolfhounds found that their owner was gone, looked at each other, then stood up and trotted to Su Ming, wagging their tails, and stretched out their tongues to lick Su Ming's face. "Stop licking, it's all saliva, it's disgusting." Su Ming rubbed the wolfhound's chin, got up from the ground, patted the mud on his body, and grinned at Nangongyan who came over. "A bunch of stupid birds, they don't know how to hide when they see wasps coming, with this IQ, they can only be thugs. Are you okay?" Nangongyan looked at Su Ming from front to back for a while, and made sure that Su Ming was not stung by a wasp. Then she took out a pack of tissues, pulled out one and handed it to Su Ming to wipe his face. Su Ming looked like nothing happened, and he held the reins of the two wolfhounds in his hands. "Hey, don't you want to?" Nangongyan opened her eyes wide and looked at the two wolfhounds. "If they want to follow me, what can I do? I'm in need of someone to watch the gate." Su Ming shrugged, squatted down, and asked the wolfhounds seriously, "I'm asking you, Are you willing to follow me? The two wolfhounds stretched their tongues out and panted. Oh my God, you are really the king of beasts, Nangongyan said speechlessly. The frightened old man who was fishing interrupted and said, you two, hurry up, wait for them to call people back, we can't leave. There were 2 people when we went, and 3 people when we came back, plus 2 big wolfhounds. The Wrangler has 2 rows of 5 seats. When Su Ming came, he removed the roof. The 2 wolfhounds sat in the trunk. Along the way, they put their front paws on the edge of the car and lay there curiously looking out. Su Ming chatted with the old man fishing while driving. The old man's name is Zhu Chenggui. He is over 60 years old this year. He used to live by the reservoir. At that time, there was no Huading reservoir. Zhu Chenggui, like all the mountain people living nearby, lived off the mountain and the water. He had a few acres of land and fish at home. In winter, he went into the mountains to hunt and pick winter bamboo shoots and walnuts. He lived a good life. Later, the reservoir was developed and a large-scale migration project was carried out, and all the nearby villagers were relocated. Zhu Chenggui took a resettlement fee and moved to the city to live. He had lived in the mountains for the first half of his life and had no education. After moving to the city, he could not find a good job at all. He could only guard the gate of a factory. He had very little income, and he had to pay rent and live. He could not make ends meet. After decades, he had not married a wife, and the little resettlement fee he subsidized was almost gone. He was reluctant to buy vegetables, and occasionally came to the reservoir to fish to supplement his life. From this perspective, Zhu Chenggui actually came to the reservoir to steal fish. Su Ming thought for a moment and asked, you can fish, so can you raise fish? Zhu Chenggui opened his mouth to reveal a mouthful of burnt yellow teeth, and smiled proudly, yes, there is no mountain people who can't raise fish. My family used to dig a fish pond, and we could sell a lot of money every year. Later, we filled it up to build a reservoir. That's perfect. I have a lake. Can you help me see if I can raise fish? The old man looked at the time and said hesitantly, I have to work the night shift and I have to go back before 9 o'clock in the evening. Don't worry, Su Ming stepped on the accelerator, and the Wrangler rushed out. Su Ming first sent Nangongyan home, then took the dog and Zhu Chenggui back to the zoo and headed straight to Shuahun Lake. The water surface is quite large, probably more than 100 mu. If the fish are well raised, 1 mu can produce tens of thousands of catties of fish. Tens of thousands of catties per mu, Su Ming was shocked. What does this mean? It means that there are fish everywhere in the lake, fish bump into fish, and throwing a stone can knock over a fish. Zhu Chenggui said, just raise them together. If you raise the 4 major carps well, it's easy to raise tens of thousands of catties per mu. The 4 major carps are the traditional 4 freshwater fishes of green grass, silver carp and bighead carp. Carp is also very common in China, more than the 4 major carps, but because of the taboo of the surname Li during the Tang dynasty, the court banned the fishing and consumption of carp, so carp is not among the 4 major carps. The 4 major carps are not the most delicious fish, and the price is not high, but they are the most common fish with the largest market share and the widest sales. There are some special fish that are of high value but also require a high investment. The more valuable the fish is, the worse its disease resistance is. They have strict requirements for the growth environment and food. If you are not careful, they will die and all your money will be lost. Therefore, they are not within Su Ming's consideration for the time being. Zhu Chenggui continued, silver carp is moving close to the water surface, and bighead carp, which is the fat-headed fish, swims in the middle of the water. Both of these fish can purify the water quality. Grass carp and herring are at the bottom of the water, one eats vegetarian food and the other eats meat. These types of fish are mixed when raised together, not only do they not interfere with each other, but they can also promote each other and increase production. If you do such a large-scale breeding, the fry and feed will cost a lot of money, right? Su Ming calculated and found that he had less than 2 million left. He couldn't invest all his money before he was sure that he would make money. On fish farming. Shuahun Lake has more than 100 acres of water surface. He has little experience now and is unwilling to raise too many. Even if the breeding density just mentioned is 1/3, the investment in fry and daily feed is not a small amount of money. Zhu Chenggui showed a sly smile like a farmer. You must buy fish fry. The big fish will feed the small fish later, and you will have fry in the lake. You can gradually reduce the amount of fish every year. As for feed, try to feed it as little as possible. I tell you, you will grow up eating feed. The fish smells fishy and is not worth the price. We used to raise 4 domestic fishes, and no one ever said to buy feed to feed the fish. That is not damaging our own brand. Then what are you feeding? Su Ming asked puzzledly. Although the fish fed with feed do not taste very good, they grow very fast. What can we use without feed? Natural growth is good, but the growth is too slow. It only takes several years to grow 1 pound. How can we waste this time? Seeing Zhu Chenggui deliberately smiling and saying nothing, Su Ming quickly handed over a cigarette. Zhu Chenggui chuckled, lit the cigarette and took a puff before saying, "Don't feed anything. The key is, you have to raise more snakehead fish in the lake. As long as there are with the snakehead fish here, you don't need to feed the other fish, they will naturally grow fast and well." "Why is this?" Su Ming asked curiously. "After you raise snake-headed fish, buy some small fish from the sea and feed them to the snake-headed fish every now and then. The fish in the sea are very oily, and the feces that the snake-headed fish excretes after eating are all oily and highly nutritious. Other types of fish eat snake-headed fish feces. Blackfish excrement is naturally natural, and because it is highly oily, other domestic fish will grow better than wild fish after eating it." After listening to Zhu Chenggui's explanation, it seemed to make sense, so he asked, "Is offshore fish expensive?" "You have to buy it in the market. It costs about 1 to 2,000 yuan per ton, and it's cheaper to go directly to the fisherman's house to collect it. They usually can't sell that kind of small miscellaneous fish. There is no need to feed miscellaneous fish every day. You can raise more aquatic plants, green algae, etc., and then mix in some loach screwheads and it will be enough. Over the course of a year, if you raise it well, you can harvest 3 to 4,000 catties of domestic fish and 2 to 3,000 catties of snakehead fish per acre, which will definitely not be a problem. People with skills may not necessarily be able to be bosses. Zhu Chenggui is a typical example. He has the skills to raise fish, but he does not have the funds or space to raise them. Su Ming was just the opposite. "But your water?" Zhu Chenggui pointed to the dark Shuahun Lake not far away, shook his head and said, "It's too bad." "What should we do?" Su Ming asked. "We used to raise fish, and the fish ponds were only a few acres. Every year when we fished, we drained all the water in the pond and brought it back from the lake. There was no water quality problem." "Your lake is too big, so drain it all." "Absolutely not. You can only take your time, raise less fish and more aquatic plants at first, and restore the ecology of the entire lake. After the water quality improves in a few years, you can raise fish on a large scale." Su Ming slapped his forehead and said, "For a long time, it would take several years to raise him. I took the contract for 3 years. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 48. Seeing that it was getting late, Su Ming drove Zhu Chenggui back to the factory where he was on duty. On the way back, Zhu Chenggui intentionally or unintentionally turned the topic to cigarettes and alcohol, saying that life was hard and he couldn't bear to drink even a little wine. Su Ming was a transparent person. Passing by a supermarket, he got off the car and bought 2 bottles of Jiananshan and a piece of Angshuangzi for Zhu Chenggui to take. Zhu Chenggui kept thanking him for the 200 yuan worth of things, saying that if he had any problems with fish farming in the future, he could just ask him. He was old and could not do other things, but he was very good at fish farming and fishing. Although they didn't spend much time together, Su Ming could see that Zhu Chenggui had a peasant-like cunningness and was more or less mercenary, so he didn't plan to rely too much on him for fish farming. When they returned to the zoo, they were in the evening rush hour, and there was a traffic jam all the way. When they returned to the Tingfen Water Pavilion, it was already dark and almost 8 o'clock. Before entering the door, they heard a burst of cats and dogs barking in the water pavilion. When I opened the door, the house was in a mess. Pots and pans were overturned all over the floor. Two big wolf dogs and the cat army led by Dahe were confronting each other, and the situation was tense. Led by Dahe, several cats formed a semicircle and forced the two big wolf dogs into the corner. Their hair was all blown up, their toes were high, and their tails were straight like Teletubbies. The big wolf dogs were not to be outdone. They leaned against the wall, lowered their front half, opened their mouths to reveal their sharp canine teeth, and barked at the group of cats, ready to pounce at any time. The alligator snapper probably came to the house to find something to eat. It had a bag of opened Cheetos in its mouth and was sandwiched between the two sides. There was a cat with a mental attack in front of it and a wolf dog brother behind it. It was so scared that it stretched its big head and kept looking in both directions in panic, and was in a dilemma. As the saying goes, those who watch the fun are not afraid of big troubles. On the beam, the wasp Ergozi also ran out of his nest and flew around the room, making annoying buzzing sounds, which was a typical way of adding fuel to the fire. "Stop it, all of you!" Su Ming strode in, pointed at the nose and roared at all the animals in the world. The alligator turtle was cunning and cruel. Taking advantage of the time when the cat and the wolf dog brothers were stunned, it held the bag of crispy horns in its mouth, and climbed out of the water pavilion with its limbs as fast as the wind, and jumped into the small lake with a gulp. Woof woof woof. Meow meow meow. Buzz buzz buzz. Buzz your mother. This is none of your business. Su Ming raised his head and pointed at Ergozi. Go back to your nest. Ergozi leisurely circled the room and returned to its small wasp nest, but its two belly eyes flashed with thieves, and it couldn't help wanting to continue watching the show. The wolf dog brothers wagged their tails and wanted to pull their tongues to the floor. They kept trying to please Su Ming and wanted him to help them. You two are cowards, but you are the descendants of wolves. You are bullied by cats, and you have the nerve to come and complain to me. Su Ming rolled his eyes. The cats also restrained their fur, raised their heads and walked gracefully with cat steps, and walked to the nest on the side and lay down one by one. And you, what are you doing? Go out and fight if you want to. Look at the mess you made at home. Su Ming pointed at the mess on the ground. Dahe yawned and rubbed his face with his fleshy cat paws, looking cool and indifferent. I have to set a rule for you. Whoever makes trouble again in the future will not be allowed to eat for a day. Su Ming was already depressed about the fish farming, but according to Zhu Chenggui, it would not be profitable to raise fish within a few years, so what's the point of doing it? Although his money came easily, he couldn't waste it like this. The contract would expire in a few years. Wouldn't the contract fee of more than 700,000 yuan be wasted? While cleaning up the messy waterside pavilion, Su Ming was thinking about how to find a way to purify the water quality of Shuahun Lake as soon as possible. The reason why the nearby Huading Reservoir is suitable for fish farming is because of its good water quality. Shuahun Lake is an artificial lake and has not been managed for many years. It is impossible to reach the water quality of Huading Reservoir in a short time, but even if it has 30% of the water quality standard of Huading Reservoir, it is enough for fish farming. The two wolfhounds didn't care whether Su Ming was in a good mood or not. They wagged their tails and circled around him, as if they were eager to report something. Su Ming used his mental power to explore a little, only to find that the two guys were very hungry. It turned out that they hadn't eaten for a day. There was no need to ask or think. Su Ming knew that it must be the cats who bullied the newcomers and ate alone, so he turned his head and glared at Dahe. Meow. Dahe called out reluctantly, and then pulled out a bunch of things from the depths of the cat's nest. Cat food, dog food, snacks, there were even a few lively little fish and shrimps. Have you learned to hide things? Don't bully the wolfdog brothers in the future, and you two are not allowed to bite cats. Well, you two, just call them Wangke and Defu. Su Ming nodded at the wolfdog brothers. Wangke and Defu ran away happily with the food in their mouths. Dahe and a few cat brothers had already eaten their fill, and boredly used their claws to tease a dying crayfish. The crayfish dragged its tail and tried to escape, but Dahe scratched it back with one claw. The crayfish turned over several times and raised its two large claws to shake at Dahe as if in protest. Due to following Su Ming all day long and frequent contact with animal friends, the strength and speed of several cats have increased significantly. The crayfish pinched a few times, but Dahe nimbly dodged it, and Dahe whirred. With a wave of his hand, the crayfish was immediately knocked away and hit the wall with a bang. Its back shell cracked and it looked like it would not survive. You can eat as long as you want, don't be so cruel, okay? Just as he was talking, Su Ming suddenly had an idea and seemed to remember something very important. Wait. Wait, crayfish, where did the crayfish come from? Su Ming remembered that when he asked Datu and the snapping turtle to go to Shuahun Lake to inquire about the situation, they found that although there were few fish in Shuahun Lake, there were many loaches, crayfish, crabs, and the like. These animals like to live in dirty water. Living in mud. A bold idea came to his mind. He didn't bother to clean up the house, strode to the platform, and shouted towards the lake, "Old turtle, follow me." After that, he turned around and ran towards Shuahun Lake. The zoo has long been closed, and there is not a single ghost on the edge of Shuahun Lake. The wind blows the weeping willows on the shore, making a soft rustling sound. A large ball of water appeared on the lake near the shore. A big-headed catfish that was already more than a foot long emerged from the water with its beard shaking. It also held a small loach with half of its tail exposed in its mouth. Seeing Su Ming, the big-headed catfish, the catfish raised its neck and swallowed the loach whole into its stomach. Then it swung its tail and straightened up in the water, waiting for Su Ming's order. "Old turtle, big head, you two go to the water and drive all the loaches, lobsters, crabs, etc., who can dig holes, to the shore. I want to lecture you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 49. Shuahun Lake, Sleepless Tonight? A clever big-headed catfish and a fierce alligator turtle, the two guys joined forces to make a big fuss in Shuahun Lake, like a warlord conscripting men, driving the loaches, eels, crabs, and lobsters in the river to the lake in groups. For such a large lake, if it were done manually, it might not be possible to find all the shrimps and crabs in a month or two, but the catfish has lived in the water for a while, wandering around in the water all day long, and is very familiar with every inch of this water area. Where there are lobsters and where there are many loaches, the big head knows it clearly, and takes the alligator turtle to the key point. The alligator turtle is speechless in front of cats and dogs, but in front of aquatic creatures, it immediately transforms into the most terrible natural enemy. If there are disobedient ones, they will be bitten to death as food. There are many shrimps and crabs in the lake, and Su Ming doesn't mind giving this subordinate some benefits. Su Ming was not idle either. After the big-headed catfish locked the position, Su Ming rushed over with a boat, used his mental power to control all the aquatic creatures that could dig holes, and then handed them over to the alligator turtle to escort them to the lakeside. He worked until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and finally searched the entire Shuahun Lake. Except for a few fish that escaped the net, almost all the aquatic creatures that could dig holes in Shuahun Lake were driven to a deserted dock. There are not many aquatic creatures in the lake, but that is relative to the surface of the 100-acre lake. At this time, the loaches, yellow eels, shrimps, soldiers, and crabs under the surface of the 100-acre lake are all gathered together. The scene is really a bit scary. In the night, the dark water surface is violently churning, and dense black shadows are constantly flashing under the water. Su Ming took a deep breath and sprinkled all his mental power like a fishing net towards the densely populated areas under the water. Su Ming only gave the loaches and the like the simplest order: dig holes in the direction of Huading Reservoir. His idea was simple and crude. If the Shuahun Lake and Huading Reservoir could be connected, the Shuahun Lake would become a living water, and the water quality would be completely improved in less than a month, and there would be no need to worry about the water quality deteriorating in the future. Get started, Su Ming waved his hand. The Shuahun Lake looked the same as before, but a huge project had begun under the dark water. Loaches and eels are experts in digging holes, and they are first class in both technology and endurance. This kind of creature not only likes to dig holes, but also is not afraid of hardship or fatigue. They will not get tired even if they work for several days in a row. If the sewer pipes in the city are blocked, put a few loaches and eels in, and it will be unblocked in no time. Crayfish and crabs are the best porters. They may have a blood relationship with dung beetles. They like to roll the soil into balls and block the door of their own house. They are useful at this time. They can move the soil dug out by loaches and eels from the passage. When encountering gravel blocking the road, they can also act as an assault force to move the gravel away. In order to prevent the dug passage from collapsing, Su Ming also specially found a construction map of the zoo and dug from the direction of geological stability. At the same time, the size of each passage is also controlled within a certain range. If necessary, pipes can be purchased and laid in the holes dug by loaches. The closest place to the reservoir of Shuahun Lake is about 1 kilometer away. A lot of soil will definitely be generated during the digging process, which can be used to fill the bottom of the lake to form a thick layer of silt for breeding blackfish. Maybe it can also focus on economic aquatic plants such as lotus roots. Su Ming can now control up to hundreds of aquatic creatures at a time, and then use these controlled aquatic creatures to influence other similar creatures. Alligator turtles and big-headed catfish assist on the side and act as supervisors. There are about 500 or 600 people going into battle together each time, and the remaining loaches, crabs, etc. are arranged in shifts and take turns. According to digging for 7 or 8 hours a day, it will take less than half a month to dig through. But after just 2 hours, Su Ming couldn't stand it anymore, and his mental power was almost exhausted. After having monkey wine, the total amount of mental power was rising every day, but it couldn't withstand the continuous work of controlling so many aquatic creatures at the same time. In desperation, he could only stop working temporarily and go back to the waterside pavilion to sleep and replenish his mental power. As a result, he was awakened by tourists who came to row boats outside before he slept for a few hours. Su Ming muttered and cursed, rubbed his eyes and got out of bed. After the initial month of novelty, the cruise business has become more stable, with a weekly income of about 10,000 yuan, which is about 50,000 yuan a month. Excluding the cost, the 10% management fee to be paid to the zoo in the future, and the half share to Wang Hao, Su Ming can make a steady profit of about 20,000 yuan a month. He doesn't care about this little money now, so he decided to temporarily shut down the cruise for a while, and move the cruise business to the artificial lake after the channel of the artificial lake is dug, so that the cats can take turns to collect money. If other businesses, such as fish farming, can grow in the future, Su Ming even thinks that he can hire more park employees to manage the cruise business. This job is not tiring, and it is easy to sit and make money. It is a benefit for the park employees and an explanation to Director Song. After all, Many things in the future will still require the support of Director Song and the zoo staff. But it's not the time yet. After Su Ming got up, he went to feed the animals first. In the wolf pack, the female wolf's belly was big and her appetite was not very good. She lay in the room listlessly all day long. However, the Wolf King was indifferent. He just kept pretending to be cold and arrogant all day long, as if it was none of his business. There was no Lao Wang around the wolf house, only the red fox and the black bear family. Of course, the black bear father could not run over from dozens of meters to seduce the Wolf King's wife. Even if the red fox had the heart, it did not have the courage, and even if it had the courage, it did not have the ability. Su Ming was the only keeper in the zoo who dared to go directly into the cage to feed the Saker falcon. When the Saker falcon saw Su Ming coming, it flapped its wings and pounced on Su Ming. As soon as Su Ming raised his arm, the Saker falcon landed steadily on his forearm. Although wearing thick sleeves, the Saker falcon's steel-like claws still scratched Su Ming's forearm painfully. "I'll take you out for a flight another day," Su Ming nodded to the Saker falcon. This guy has been longing for the unrestrained blue sky for a long time. Out of protection for the wild nature of the Saker falcon, if Su Ming can tame the Saker falcon, the zoo will allow him to take the Saker falcon out to the wild occasionally. When several male peacocks in the peacock garden saw Su Ming coming, they all spread their tails and shook their tails coquettishly, which made Su Ming very embarrassed. "I am not a female peacock. Why are you spreading your tails at me all day?" After a busy period, I returned to the waterside pavilion and prepared to continue sleeping and replenish my mental strength. I will go to the lake to fight again tonight. As soon as I entered the door, I smelled a faint sweet smell. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 50. In the courtyard of the two-story villa of Huading Fishery Company, the bald man and several of his subordinates stood in a row with bruises and swollen faces. The bald man was the worst, with his head still wrapped in gauze. They were chased by wasps that day, and in the end they had no choice but to jump into the lake and escape. Although they reacted quickly and saved their lives, they also suffered a big loss. The most serious one almost died in the lake. After being fished out, he was sent directly to the hospital for emergency treatment, and he only saved his life. Halfway to the hospital, the bald man started convulsing in the ambulance and became incontinent. According to the emergency doctor, they were lucky to have survived being targeted by such a large swarm of wasps in the wild. Saving one's life comes at a price. Boss Joe of Huading Fishing Company paid more than 20,000 yuan in medical expenses to the hospital. "Brother Joe, that kid must be the one causing trouble. When I recover from my injury, I'll find some brothers to teach him a lesson," the bald man said angrily. Zhou Jin, the owner of the fishing company, is an old gangster. He was quite famous among the gangsters in Yangchuan City back then. Later, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for serious injuries resulting in death. After he came out, he felt deeply that the world had changed. Those who were rich these days were the real men. Sooner or later he would be eliminated if he only knew how to fight and kill. So he gathered a group of brothers who were released from prison and contracted the project east of Huading Lake Reservoir. Fish farming was started in a water area. Although it is outdated to simply fight and kill, he has a group of ferocious men under his command, who are simply a tyrant in the fish market. In addition, the fish raised in Huading Lake are indeed delicious and very popular. In just a few years, Zhou Jin has occupied a large part of Yangchuan's fishery market. Hearing the bald man complain, Zhou Jin frowned slightly. "You are stupid. You didn't know how to hide when the wasp came. You deserve to be stung. Why didn't the wasp sting him?" The bald man groaned and said nothing. Strictly speaking, it seemed that the boy couldn't be blamed for this. But no matter what, if that kid hadn't caused trouble, how could he have been stung by a wasp so miserably? Thinking of the fact that he was incontinent in the ambulance that day and that his brothers were still laughing at him about it, The bald man couldn't help but feel itchy with hatred. The two dogs are also gone. Could it be that the boy took them away? Another gangster said. If it's gone, it's gone. Just buy two more. Joe Jin waved his hand impatiently, interrupting the gangster's complaints. His face sank slightly, and he said seriously, let's put the wasp matter aside for now. The fry will be released next month, so please take your mind back. Watch out. If something happens to the fish pond, I'll skin you. Joe Jin was older than everyone present, and he was their boss. His face sank, and the other gangsters, including the bald man, did not dare to say anything. As soon as Su Ming entered the door of Shuixi, he smelled a faint sweet smell floating in the room. The cats didn't have to go to work today and were idle at home. They were sitting in a small circle on the ground, staring longingly at the beams above their heads. Wang Ke and Defu also held their heads high and shouted at the rafters. Ergoza's den was right on the beam. I don't know how Ergoza offended these cats and dogs. Buzz buzz. A swarm of bees carried a small honeycomb the size of a fist and flew out from the rafters, landing slowly in front of Su Ming. Ergoza followed behind, circling around the honeycomb. That fragrance comes from the honeycomb. Honey. Su Ming stretched out his hand to take the honeycomb, and saw that there were dense holes on the honeycomb, and there was a layer of light golden yellow and sticky stuff on it. Before honey is processed, it actually has no fragrance, but the honey in this small honeycomb exudes a refreshing sweet fragrance. Ergoza loved honey the most. He circled around the honeycomb, but he didn't dare to snatch the food from Su Ming's hand. He was so anxious that he kept buzzing and barking. Brother, you are a wasp, not a fly. Can you have some dignity and stop buzzing all day long? Su Ming glared at Ergoza, but still used his little finger to dig some honey into the honeycomb and stretched it out. Ergoza pounced on Su Ming's honey-stained fingers with a swish, opened his mouth and ate fiercely, flapping his wings while eating. Su Ming was disgusted by what he saw. The way this guy was eating on his fingers was just like a fly lying on poop. Come, and see. Su Ming dug some more honey into the honeycomb, and wiped it on the mouths of the cat and wolf dog brothers one by one, causing the two guys to stick out their tongues and lick around their mouths. The saliva of Wang Ke and Defu flowed down the corners of their mouths to the ground. The two silly guys actually lowered their heads and licked the honey-flavored saliva. Is it really that delicious? Su Ming was slightly stunned. As far as he knew, unprocessed wild honey tasted very ordinary and was not delicious at all. Some people even felt it had a strange smell. Is there something weird about this honey? Thinking about it, he tasted a little himself. It tastes really good, sweet, and fragrant, a bit like syrup. Not only that, after taking the honey, his mental strength recovered quickly. Go ahead, isn't this the legendary Big Blue? Su Ming was afraid that he had made a mistake, so he applied a little more honey and tasted it. As expected, his mental power increased rapidly. According to this rate, a fist-sized honeycomb is enough to replenish the existing mental power 7 or 8 times. This is definitely good news. With this treasure, you don't have to wait for the mental power to recover automatically every day. When the mental power is insufficient, you can eat some honey to make up for it. In this way, it can not only speed up the progress of the project, but also be of great benefit to other aspects. For example, if you carry some honey with you wherever you go in the future, you can continue to fight for a long time. In addition to being surprised, Su Ming went to the store to buy several famous honey products on the market, and came back to experiment one by one. In the end, it was discovered that only the honey brewed by the group of bees that he saved had the effect of improving mental power, while other honeys did not have this effect at all, and in terms of taste, it seemed to be inferior to the wild honey brewed by the bee colony. Su Ming pondered for a moment. First, it was the monkey wine that could increase the upper limit of mental power, and now it was the honey that could speed up the recovery of mental power. There is no doubt that this is naturally because the bees have come into contact with mental power and some changes have occurred. Let's go to the back mountain to see the group of bees.